The Georgia sun beat down on Fort Benning's training grounds as 32 recruits stood at attention. Among them was Sergeant Maya Chen, 28 years old, 5'4", and about to become the first woman ever assigned to train Alpha Company's elite reconnaissance unit. She'd earned this position through 12 years of exemplary service, 2 tours overseas, and scores that put her in the top 2% of all soldiers in her division. But as she walked toward the assembled men that Monday morning, none of that seemed to matter. Staff Sergeant Derek Holland watched her approach with barely concealed contempt. At 6'3" and 230 pounds of muscle, he commanded respect through intimidation. He'd been training Alpha Company for 8 years, and he'd made it clear in every meeting leading up to this moment that he didn't want a woman on his team. "Gentlemen," Holland announced, his voice dripping with sarcasm, "meet your new training officer. Try not to break her on the first day." A few recruits snickered. Maya kept her expression neutral, her spine straight. She'd heard worse, much worse. "Sergeant Chen will be assisting with your physical conditioning," Holland continued, packing in front of the formation. "Now I know what you're all thinking. How's someone who probably can't even do 10 pull-ups going to train us?" He paused, letting the words sink in. "Well, we're about to find out." Maya felt the familiar burn of anger in her chest, but she'd learned long ago not to let it show. Instead, she stepped forward. "Permission to address the recruits, Staff Sergeant?" she asked, her voice steady. Holland shrugged. "Be my guest." Maya turned to face the men. Most wouldn't meet her eyes. A few looked curious. 2 in the back row were openly smirking. "My name is Sergeant Maya Chen," she began. "I've served in the Army for 12 years. I've completed Ranger School, airborne training, and advanced reconnaissance operations. I've served in combat zones where I've carried wounded soldiers twice my size to safety. I'm here because I earned this position, same as every one of you earned your spot in this unit." She paused, scanning the faces before her. "Some of you are wondering if I can keep up. Others have already decided I can't. That's fine. I'm not here to convince you with words. I'm here to do my job. Now let's get to work." Holland stepped between her and the recruits. "Hold on there, Sergeant. Before we start the day's training, I think it's only fair we establish some baseline standards. After all, we need to know our instructors can perform at the level we expect from our recruits." Maya saw exactly where this was going. "What did you have in mind, Staff Sergeant?" "Watch this," Holland said with a smirk, turning to address the recruits. "Sergeant Chen here is going to demonstrate proper form on the obstacle course, full combat load, standard time limit, and just to make it interesting," he paused for effect, "if she can beat my personal record, I'll run the course myself carrying double weight. If she can't, well, maybe we'll reconsider whether this assignment is the right fit." It was a setup and everyone knew it. Holland's record on the obstacle course was legendary. He'd set it 6 years ago and no one had come close since. The course was brutal, walls to scale, ropes to climb, tunnels to crawl through, all while carrying 60 pounds of gear. Maya could refuse. She could report this to the base commander, claim harassment. But she'd fought too hard to get here, and she knew that backing down now would mean losing every shred of credibility before she even started. "What's the time to beat?" she asked. 4 minutes 32 seconds, Holland replied, his smirk widening. Maya nodded once. "Get me the gear." 10 minutes later, she stood at the starting line of the obstacle course, 60 pounds of equipment strapped to her back and body. Her heart pounded, but not from fear, from anticipation. She'd run courses like this 100 times. She knew her capabilities, knew her limits. What Holland didn't know was that Maya had been training specifically for this moment. She'd heard through unofficial channels that he might try something like this. So for the past 3 months, while waiting for her transfer to be processed, she'd run obstacle courses at every opportunity. She'd studied videos of Fort Benning's specific layout. She'd trained with extra weight, pushed herself beyond what she thought possible. "Ready?" Holland called out, stopwatch in hand. Several recruits had gathered to watch. Maya took a deep breath, centered herself, and nodded. Go! She exploded forward, hitting the first obstacle, a 7-foot wall, at full sprint. Her technique was flawless, using momentum to carry her up and over without wasting energy. She landed in a roll, already moving toward the rope climb. Her hands burned as she pulled herself up 20 feet of thick rope, but she'd built calluses for this. At the top, she slapped the bell and controlled her descent, sliding down fast but safe. The recruits were silent now, watching with growing attention. Maya hit the crawl tunnel next, a 50-foot stretch of mud and wire barely 18 inches high. This was where bigger soldiers struggled, where size became a disadvantage. She moved like water, smooth and fast, the weight on her back distributed perfectly to slide through without snagging. She emerged from the tunnel and sprinted to the tire run, her boots finding the center of each tire with practiced precision. No wasted steps, no hesitation. The balance beam came next. This was where many soldiers failed, where exhaustion made them clumsy. Maya had practiced this specific skill for hours, training her body to stay controlled even when her muscles screamed for rest. She was halfway across when she heard Holland's voice, 3 minutes. That meant she was ahead of pace, barely. The hardest part was still coming. The final obstacle was the reason Holland's record had stood so long. A cargo net stretched 40 feet high, followed immediately by a wall traverse that required moving horizontally across a wall using only small handholds, then a final sprint to the finish line. Maya attacked the cargo net, her smaller size actually an advantage here as she weaved through the gaps rather than climbing over them. Her shoulders burned, her fingers cramped, but she didn't slow down. At the top, she could see the entire course behind her. The recruits looked tiny from up here. Holland stood with his arms crossed, the stopwatch in his hand. She went over the top and down the other side, not climbing but controlled falling, using the net's bounce to speed her descent. Her feet hit the ground and she ran to the wall traverse. This was it. This was where her training would either pay off or fail her. The handholds were barely big enough for fingertips. She had to move fast or her grip would fail. Right hand, right foot, left foot. Don't think, just move. Trust the training. Trust the muscle memory. Halfway across, her left hand slipped. For one terrifying second, she hung by 3 points of contact, 60 pounds trying to pull her down. The recruits gasped. But Maya had been here before, in training, in combat, in moments where failure meant more than just embarrassment. She swung her body, used the momentum to reach the next hold, and kept moving. 5 more feet, 3 more, 1 more. She grabbed the final hold and dropped to the ground, her legs absorbing the impact. The finish line was 30 yards away. Her lungs burned, her vision tunneled, but she could see it. She ran. Every step was agony. Every breath felt like fire, but she'd endured worse. She'd carried wounded comrades through enemy fire. She'd marched 20 miles with stress fractures in her feet. She'd survived things that would have broken most people. This was just pain. Pain was temporary. She crossed the finish line and immediately doubled over, hands on her knees, gasping for air. The world spun. "Time," someone shouted. Maya looked up through the sweat stinging her eyes. Holland stood there, staring at the stopwatch like it had personally betrayed him. "Well," Maya managed to say between breaths, "what's the time?" Holland's jaw clenched. For a long moment he didn't answer. The recruits waited in absolute silence. Finally he spoke, his voice tight. 4 minutes, 28 seconds. Maya stood up straight, despite her shaking legs. "I believe you mentioned something about running the course with double weight, Staff Sergeant." The look Holland gave her could have melted steel. But he was trapped by his own words, spoken in front of 36 witnesses. "Tomorrow," he said through gritted teeth, "we've got actual training to conduct today." He turned and walked away, leaving Maya standing at the finish line, still trying to catch her breath. One of the recruits, a young man with bright red hair, approached hesitantly. That was incredible, Sergeant." "Just doing my job, Private," Maya replied, unbuckling the heavy gear. But as she walked back to the equipment shed, she knew this was just the beginning. She'd won this battle, but Holland wasn't going to let it go. Men like him never did. They'd just find new ways to undermine her, new tests to set up, new obstacles to put in her path. The next 3 weeks were the hardest of Maya's career, and that was saying something. Holland kept his word and ran the obstacle course with double weight, but he made sure to do it at 5 in the morning when only a handful of recruits were present to witness his humiliation. He finished it barely and never spoke of it again. But that didn't mean he accepted her. If anything, his hostility intensified, just became more subtle. He assigned her the worst duties: inventory checks in the sweltering equipment sheds, paperwork that kept her away from actual training sessions, overnight security details that left her exhausted. When she did get to work with recruits, he would interrupt her instructions, countermand her orders, or simply talk over her as if she hadn't spoken. The recruits noticed. Some of them, like the red-haired private, whose name was Connor Mills, began to respect Maya for her quiet persistence. But others took their cue from Holland, treating her with the same dismissive contempt. The worst of them was Sergeant First Class Kurt Wagner, Holland's second in command. Wagner was a career soldier who'd spent 20 years in the Army without ever seeing combat. He made up for his lack of field experience with an encyclopedic knowledge of regulations and an ability to weaponize paperwork. Maya first clashed with Wagner during a hand-to-hand combat training session. She was demonstrating a disarming technique to a group of recruits when Wagner stepped forward. "That's not how we do it in Alpha Company," he said loudly. "You're teaching them wrong." Maya kept her composure. "This is the technique taught in the Army Combatives Manual, Sergeant. Level 2 certification." "I don't care what some manual says," Wagner replied. "I've been training soldiers for 15 years. Your way will get someone hurt." He was wrong, and Maya knew it. But arguing in front of the recruits would only undermine both of them, so she made a decision. "Why don't you demonstrate the technique you prefer, Sergeant Wagner? Then the recruits can see both methods." Wagner's eyes narrowed, but he couldn't refuse without looking afraid. "Fine, Private Mills, you're my partner." Connor stepped forward reluctantly. He was a good kid, eager to learn, and Maya could see the uncertainty in his face. Wagner went through his technique, a variation that relied more on strength than leverage. It worked if you were bigger and stronger than your opponent, but it left openings that a skilled fighter would exploit. "Now," Wagner said, turning to Maya with a challenging look, "why don't you show us your technique? I'll be your partner." This was another test. Wagner outweighed her by at least 80 pounds. He wanted to prove that her technique wouldn't work against a larger opponent. Maya stepped forward. "All right, come at me like you're trying to strike me with that training knife." Wagner grabbed the rubber knife from the equipment bag. "You sure about this, Sergeant? I wouldn't want to embarrass you." "I'm sure." What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Wagner lunged forward, overconfident and sloppy. Maya sidestepped, redirected his momentum, and used a joint lock that had him on his knees before he realized what happened. The training knife clattered to the ground. The recruit stood in stunned silence. Maya released Wagner and stepped back. "The key to combatives isn't strength," she said calmly. "It's leverage, timing, and technique. Size matters, but skill matters more." Wagner got to his feet, his face red with anger and humiliation. "Lucky move," he muttered. "Luck has nothing to do with it, Sergeant. It's training." Maya turned to the recruits. "Pair up, practice both techniques, figure out which one works better for you." That evening, Maya was called to the base commander's office. Colonel James Morrison was a career officer in his 50s, known for being fair but by the book. Maya had met him only once during her initial in processing. "Sergeant Chen," Morrison said as she entered his office. "Sit down." Maya sat, maintaining proper posture, her hands folded in her lap. Morrison studied her for a moment. "I've been receiving reports about your performance with Alpha Company." Here it comes, Maya thought. Holland and Wagner had obviously complained. "Staff Sergeant Holland says you're struggling to integrate with the unit," Morrison continued. "He's concerned that your assignment here might not be the right fit." "With respect, sir," Maya said carefully, "I believe Staff Sergeant Holland's concerns stem from his own biases rather than my performance. I've met or exceeded every standard required of me. I've completed every task assigned, regardless of how difficult or unreasonable." Morrison leaned back in his chair. "He mentioned you publicly humiliated Sergeant Wagner during a training exercise." "I demonstrated a proper combatives technique, sir. Sergeant Wagner volunteered to be my training partner. If he felt humiliated, that's unfortunate, but I was simply doing my job." The colonel was quiet for a long moment. "I'm going to be straight with you, Sergeant. There are people in this command who don't think women belong in combat units. They're not going to say it out loud, they're too smart for that. But they're going to make your life difficult in 100 small ways." "I'm aware of that, sir." "Are you?" Morrison's eyes were sharp. "Because I need to know if you're here to prove a point or if you're here to be a soldier." Maya met his gaze directly. "I'm here to serve, sir. Same as I've been doing for 12 years. I don't need to prove anything to anyone except myself." Morrison nodded slowly. "Good. Because in 2 weeks, Alpha Company is participating in a major training exercise. It's a joint operation with special forces, simulated enemy insertion, hostage rescue, the whole package. It's the biggest test these recruits will face before they move on to advanced training." "Yes, sir, I've seen it on the schedule." "Holland is planning to bench you for it. Says he needs his most experienced trainers on the ground and you're too new to the unit." Morrison paused. "But I'm overruling him. You're going to be one of the primary instructors for this exercise." Maya felt a surge of gratitude but also apprehension. "Sir, that's going to create more friction with Staff Sergeant Holland." "I know, but here's the thing, Sergeant Chen. I don't care about friction. I care about readiness. And from what I've seen in your file, you have more real-world combat experience than Holland and Wagner combined. These recruits deserve to learn from someone who's actually been there." "Thank you, sir." "Don't thank me yet," Morrison said. "This exercise is going to be hell, and Holland is going to do everything he can to make you fail. So I need you to be better than good. I need you to be perfect." "I understand, sir." As Maya left the colonel's office, she felt the weight of what was coming. This training exercise wasn't just about teaching recruits. It was about proving that she belonged here, that her presence made the unit stronger, not weaker. She had 2 weeks to prepare. The next morning, Maya arrived at the training grounds before dawn. She wanted to study the terrain where the exercise would take place, a section of dense forest about 20 miles from the main base, complete with mock buildings for urban combat scenarios. She was surprised to find Private Connor Mills already there, studying a map of the area. "Private," Maya said, announcing her presence, "you're up early." Connor jumped to attention. "Sergeant, I wanted to get familiar with the exercise area, sir. Sergeant, I mean." He stumbled over his words, embarrassed. Maya smiled slightly. "Relax, Private, it's good that you're taking initiative. Mind if I join you?" "Of course not, Sergeant." They spread the map out on a field table. Connor had already marked several key positions with a pencil. "These are the expected hostage locations," he explained, "based on previous exercises, and these are the most likely approach routes." Maya studied his work. It was thorough, intelligent. "You've done your homework." "I want to do well, Sergeant. I want to make it through this program." Connor hesitated, then added, "And I want to learn from you. What you did on the obstacle course and with Sergeant Wagner, I've never seen anything like it." "It's just training, Private. Anyone can do it with enough practice." "That's not what Sergeant Wagner says. He tells people you got lucky, that you wouldn't last 5 minutes in a real fight." Maya felt a flash of anger but pushed it down. "What Sergeant Wagner thinks isn't your concern, or mine. Focus on your own training." "But it's not fair," Connor said, his voice rising slightly. "You've done everything they've asked and more, and they still treat you like you don't belong here. Half the unit won't even listen when you're instructing. They're missing out on learning from someone who actually knows what she's talking about." "Welcome to the Army, Private," Maya said, but not unkindly. "Fair doesn't always factor into it. All you can do is control what you can control, your effort, your attitude, your performance." Connor looked down at the map. "Is that enough, just doing your job well?" "Sometimes it has to be," Maya replied, "because the alternative is letting them win, letting them drive you out. And I didn't spend 12 years in this uniform to quit now." They spent the next hour going over the exercise plan together. Connor was smart, asking good questions, absorbing information quickly. As the sun rose over the training grounds, Maya realized that this was why she'd fought so hard to be here. Not for Holland's approval, not to prove anything to Wagner, but for soldiers like Connor, young people who wanted to learn, who deserved the best training possible. The next 2 weeks passed in a blur of preparation. Holland continued to undermine Maya at every opportunity, but she focused on her work. She studied every aspect of the upcoming exercise, planned contingencies, worked with the recruits who were willing to learn from her. She also noticed something interesting. As the exercise date approached, more recruits started seeking her out for advice. They'd approach her quietly, away from Holland's view, asking questions about tactics, about real combat situations, about how to handle the pressure. Word had spread about her background, 2 combat tour, multiple commendations, real-world experience that few instructors could match. The smarter recruits recognized the value of that experience. But not everyone was willing to learn. A group of about 8 recruits, led by a cocky private named Vance Tucker, remained loyal to Holland's view that Maya didn't belong. They went out of their way to make her job harder, ignoring her instructions, questioning her authority, spreading rumors. 3 days before the exercise, things came to a head. Maya was conducting a briefing on urban combat tactics when Tucker interrupted her for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. "Sergeant, no offense, but when were you actually in urban combat? Because this all sounds like textbook theory to me." Maya stopped mid-sentence. The room went quiet. Every recruit was watching to see how she'd respond. "Private Tucker," Maya said calmly, "I spent 6 months in Fallujah conducting house-to-house operations. I've cleared more buildings under fire than you've probably seen in your entire life. So yes, some of this comes from textbooks, but most of it comes from experience. Experience that kept me and my squad alive." Tucker smirked. "That's easy to say. Anyone can claim they did stuff overseas." It was a direct challenge to her integrity. Maya felt her temper rising but kept her voice level. "Are you calling me a liar, Private?" "I'm just saying, we don't really know what you've done. For all we know, you spent your tour doing admin work and are now pretending you're some kind of war hero." Before Maya could respond, Connor Mills stood up from his seat. "That's enough, Tucker," Connor said. "Sergeant Chen has more combat citations than probably everyone in this room combined. Show some respect." "Stay out of this, Mills," Tucker shot back. "Just because you're her little pet doesn't mean the rest of us have to." "Attention!" Maya's voice cracked like a whip. Both privates immediately came to attention. "Private Tucker, Private Mills, you're both out of line," Maya said. "Tucker, questioning an instructor's credentials in the middle of a briefing is insubordinate. Mills, speaking out of turn doesn't help anyone. You'll both report for extra duty tonight. 1800 hours. Dismissed. Both privates left the room, Tucker with a satisfied smirk, Connor looking ashamed. Maya continued the briefing, but she knew the damage was done. Tucker had succeeded in disrupting the session and making her look weak in front of the other recruits. That evening, as she supervised Tucker and Mills on their extra duty, cleaning the equipment sheds, Sergeant Wagner appeared. Having discipline problems, Chin, he asked with false concern. Nothing I can't handle, Sergeant. That's not what I hear. Word is the recruits are losing respect for you, starting to think you can't control them. Wagner paused. Maybe Holland was right. Maybe this assignment isn't the right fit. Maya faced him directly. The recruits who want to learn are learning. The ones who don't are making their own choice. That's on them, not me. In the Army, if your soldiers don't respect you, that's always on you, Wagner replied. Maybe that's something they didn't teach you in whatever affirmative action program got you this position. The words hung in the air like poison. Maya felt every muscle in her body tense. This was crossing a line, moving from professional antagonism to personal attack. Sergeant Wagner, Maya said quietly, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that. Because if I report what you just said, it's going to end very badly for you. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to walk away. And you're going to remember that I earned every rank, every position, every commendation through the same hard work as anyone else in this army. I don't want your respect, but I will have your professional courtesy. Are we clear? Wagner's face flushed with anger, but he knew he'd overstepped. Crystal clear, Sergeant. He walked away, leaving Maya alone with her thoughts and two very quiet privates. Tucker finished loading a crate into the shed and glanced at Maya. For just a moment, she thought she saw something like respect in his eyes, but then it was gone, replaced by his usual cocky indifference. The exercise was 2 days away. Maya knew that everything she'd worked for, everything she'd endured, was about to be tested in the most public way possible. The morning of the exercise dawned cold and gray. Maya stood in the pre-dawn darkness, watching as 75 recruits assembled in full combat gear. This was the largest training exercise of the cycle, and it would determine which recruits moved forward in the program and which ones washed out. Staff Sergeant Holland addressed the assembled group, his voice carrying across the staging area. Today you're going to put everything you've learned to the test. You'll be divided into 3 teams. Each team will have a specific objective. Fail, and you let down everyone counting on you. Succeed, and you prove you belong in Alpha Company. He gestured to 3 instructors standing behind him, himself, Wagner, and Maya. Sergeant Wagner will lead Team 1, I'll lead Team 2, and Sergeant Chen will lead Team 3. The way he said her name made it sound like an insult. Your team assignments are posted. Gear check in 15 minutes. Move out. As the recruits scattered to check the roster, Maya walked over to see which soldiers she'd been assigned. Her stomach sank. Team 3 consisted of 16 recruits, and 12 of them were from the group that had consistently questioned her authority. Tucker was on the list. So were most of his friends. Only Connor, Mills, and 3 other recruits who'd shown her respect were included. It was deliberate. Holland had stacked her team with the most difficult soldiers. Connor appeared at her elbow, his face troubled. Sergeant, this isn't right. He's setting you up to fail. I'm aware of that, Private, Maya replied calmly. But we're going to succeed anyway. Go get your team together. We need to brief. 20 minutes later, Maya's team huddled around a map of the exercise area. Their objective was the most difficult of the 3. They had to infiltrate a mock enemy compound, rescue 2 hostages, played by junior instructors, and extract without being captured by the enemy force, played by soldiers from another unit. This is a basic hostage rescue operation, Maya explained, pointing to the map. The compound is here, about 3 miles into the forest. Intelligence suggests 4 to 6 guards, but expect more. The hostages are being held in the main building, 2nd floor. Tucker raised his hand. Question, Sergeant. How are we supposed to know any of this intelligence is accurate? Seems like a lot of assumptions. It's based on reconnaissance reports from yesterday, Maya replied. But you're right to question it. In real combat, intelligence is never perfect. That's why we plan for contingencies. She outlined her strategy, a two-pronged approach with a small team creating a distraction while the main force infiltrated from the rear. It was textbook, but effective. What if the enemy force is larger than expected? Asked another recruit, Private Davis. Then we adapt. The key is maintaining communication and staying flexible. This isn't about having the perfect plan. It's about executing well under pressure and making smart decisions when things go wrong. Tucker smirked. And you've done this before, for real. Maya met his eyes. Yes, Private, I have, multiple times. Sometimes it worked exactly as planned. Other times everything went wrong and we had to improvise. That's what we're training for, the ability to think and adapt when the situation changes. They moved out at 0700 hours. The forest was dense, the morning mist still clinging to the ground. Maya positioned herself in the middle of the formation, where she could direct both the front and rear elements. The first mile passed without incident. Her team moved quietly, maintaining proper spacing and discipline. Even Tucker seemed focused on the mission. Then, as they crossed a small creek, Maya spotted something that made her raise her fist, the signal to halt. The team froze. She'd seen a trip wire, barely visible in the underbrush. It was connected to a blank charge that would simulate an explosion and mark anyone nearby as a casualty. "Good eye, Sergeant," Connor whispered. Maya carefully stepped over the wire and signaled the team to do the same. But as the 8th recruit crossed, his boot caught the wire. The blank charge exploded with a loud bang and a cloud of smoke. The recruit, Private Jennings, was immediately marked with colored smoke, indicating he was a simulated casualty. "Man down," Maya called out. This was part of the exercise. Casualties had to be treated and evacuated according to protocol. But before they could organize the evacuation, a whistle blew in the distance. The enemy force had heard the explosion and was responding. "They're coming," shouted Davis, pointing through the trees where movement was visible. Maya made a split-second decision. Tucker, Davis, Miller, establish a defensive perimeter. Connor, help me with Jennings. Everyone else, prepare to bound back 50 meters on my command. The team moved with surprising efficiency. Tucker and his group set up firing positions, while Maya and Connor applied a simulated tourniquet to Jennings's injured leg. "Sergeant, we can't carry him and fight at the same time," Tucker called out. "We should leave him and complete the mission." "Negative," Maya replied. "We don't leave anyone behind. That's not how this works." "It's just an exercise," Tucker protested. "It's never just an exercise, Private. The habits you form here are the ones you'll have in real combat. We extract Jennings and we complete the mission." The enemy force was getting closer. Maya could hear them coordinating, moving through the forest with tactical precision. "First team bound back," she ordered. 4 recruits picked up and moved 50 meters to the rear, then took up defensive positions. Second team bound back. They leapfrogged backward, maintaining cover while Connor and another recruit carried Jennings. It was slower than running, but it kept the team intact. The enemy force reached their original position and began pursuing. This was going to be close. Into the ravine, Maya pointed to a depression in the terrain about 30 meters away. "We can use it for cover." The team slid down into the ravine just as the enemy force opened fire with blank rounds. Red smoke marked several trees where they'd been standing seconds before. "Return fire," Maya commanded. Her team began engaging the enemy, the crack of blank rounds echoing through the forest. But they were outnumbered. Maya counted at least 12 enemy soldiers, maybe more. Her team was 16, minus Jennings, and they were in a defensive position with limited options. This was the kind of situation that could cause panic, that could make soldiers freeze or make fatal mistakes. "Listen up," Maya shouted over the simulated gunfire. "We're going to use the ravine to move parallel to our objective. The enemy thinks we're pinned down, so they'll focus on this position. Team Alpha, Tucker, you're in charge. I need you to maintain fire for 3 minutes, then break contact and follow us. Team Bravo, you're with me. We're moving now." Tucker looked uncertain. "Sergeant, that leaves us exposed to." "I know what it leaves you exposed to, Private. I'm counting on you to handle it. Can you do that?" For the first time since they'd met, Tucker looked at Maya without arrogance or dismissiveness. He nodded. "Yes, Sergeant." 3 minutes, then break contact and follow, go. Maya led half the team down the ravine, moving as quickly as they could while carrying Jennings. Behind them, Tucker's group maintained steady fire, keeping the enemy focused on their position. After exactly 3 minutes, the firing from Tucker's position stopped. Maya heard shouting, then the sound of movement through the brush. Tucker's team was executing a tactical retreat. "Keep moving," Maya urged her group forward. The ravine curved ahead, leading them away from the enemy and back toward their objective. 10 minutes later, the two groups reunited at a prearranged rally point. Everyone was accounted for. No additional casualties. Tucker approached Maya, breathing hard. "That was close, Sergeant. They almost flanked us." "But they didn't. You held the line exactly as long as we needed. Good work, Private." Something shifted in Tucker's expression. Not quite respect, but maybe the beginning of it. The team regrouped and continued toward the objective. They'd lost time with the ambush, but they were still in the game. As they approached the compound, Maya called for a halt and sent Connor and Davis forward to scout. They returned 15 minutes later with concerning news. "There are at least 10 guards, Sergeant," Connor reported. "Way more than the intelligence suggested, and they've got fighting positions set up around the entire perimeter." Maya studied the compound through her binoculars. Connor was right. This wasn't the 4 to 6 guards they'd expected. Holland had clearly arranged for additional enemy forces to make her mission nearly impossible. "Options?" she asked the team. Several recruits offered suggestions. Direct assault, too dangerous with their numbers. Wait for darkness. They didn't have time. Call for backup against the exercise rules. Then Tucker spoke up. "What if we don't go through the perimeter? What if we go under it?" Maya lowered her binoculars. "Explain." Tucker pointed to the map. "There's a drainage culvert that runs under the compound. It's marked here. If a small team could get into that culvert, they could come up inside the perimeter, bypass the guards entirely." "The culvert opening would be guarded," another recruit pointed out. "Not if we create a distraction," Tucker replied. "A big one, something that pulls guards away from their positions." Maya considered it. It was risky. It required splitting the team again, trusting soldiers to execute complex movements without direct supervision. But it just might work. "All right," she said, "here's what we're going to do." She divided the team into 3 elements. Tucker would lead the distraction force, 8 recruits who would stage a fake assault on the front gate, making as much noise as possible. Connor would lead the infiltration team, 4 recruits who would use the culvert to get inside. Maya would command the support element, ready to provide covering fire or reinforcement as needed. "One thing," Maya added, looking at Tucker. "The distraction force is going to take casualties, probably heavy casualties. You understand that?" Tucker nodded. "We'll pull the guards away from the hostages. That's what matters." Maya felt a surge of pride. This was the soldier Tucker could be when he stopped trying to prove something and started trusting his training. "Everyone clear on the plan?" Nods all around. "Then let's move. We've got a 30-minute window before the exercise clock runs out." What happened next would determine not just the outcome of the exercise, but everything Maya had fought for since arriving at Fort Benning. The plan went into motion with military precision. Tucker's distraction force moved into position on the east side of the compound, while Connor's infiltration team crept toward the culvert entrance on the west side. Maya positioned herself on high ground with her support element, watching through binoculars. At exactly 1400 hours, Tucker's team opened fire on the compound's main gate. The blank rounds cracked through the air, and simulated explosions sent up plumes of colored smoke. It looked and sounded like a full-scale assault. Through her binoculars, Maya watched the enemy force react exactly as hoped. Guards abandoned their perimeter positions and rushed toward the gate, concentrating their forces to repel Tucker's attack. "Infiltration team, you're clear," Maya said into her radio. "Move now." Connor's team sprinted from cover and disappeared into the culvert. Maya held her breath, counting seconds. The plan required them to navigate 50 meters of tight, dark drainage pipe, emerge inside the compound, locate the hostages, and extract them, all while Tucker's team held the enemy's attention. On the east side, Tucker's assault was intensifying. His team was laying down impressive covering fire, moving and shooting with coordination that would have made any instructor proud. But the enemy force was responding with equal intensity. Red smoke began marking Tucker's soldiers as casualties. 1 down, 2 down, 3. "Tucker, you're taking heavy casualties," Maya warned over the radio. "Can you hold?" "We'll hold as long as you need, Sergeant." Tucker's voice came back, steady despite the chaos around him. 4 down, 5 down. Tucker's team was being decimated, but they weren't breaking. They were giving Connor every second they could. Then Maya's radio crackled. "This is Connor. We're inside the compound, moving to hostage location." "Copy that," Maya replied. "Be advised, most of the enemy force is still concentrated on the east gate. You should have a clear path to the main building." Through her binoculars, she watched Connor's team emerge from the culvert and sprint across the compound yard. They reached the main building and disappeared inside. At the gate, Tucker was down to 3 soldiers, including himself. They were completely pinned down, trapped behind an overturned vehicle mock-up. The enemy force was closing in. "Tucker, break contact," Maya ordered. "You've done your job, get out of there." "Negative, Sergeant," Tucker replied. "If we break now, they'll realize it was a diversion. We hold until Connor has the hostages." Maya's heart pounded. Tucker was right, but it meant his entire team would be marked as casualties. In a real situation, they'd all be dead. "Connor's status," Maya called into the radio. "Second floor, we've located the hostages. 2 instructors, both secure. We're—" Connor's voice cut off. "Connor reports." Silence. Through her binoculars, Maya saw why. 3 enemy soldiers had entered the main building. They must have realized too late that the assault was a diversion. Maya had to make a decision. She could send her support element in to help Connor, but that would leave Tucker with no backup. Or she could try to help Tucker break contact, but that might compromise Connor's extraction. Or there was a third option, a risky one. "Support element on me," Maya commanded. "We're going in." She led her 4 remaining soldiers down from the high ground, moving fast and low. Instead of heading toward Tucker or Connor, she went straight for the compound's west wall, the weakest point, now that most guards had moved to the east gate. They reached the wall and scaled it using the techniques Maya had drilled into them over the past weeks. Once inside, they split up. 2 soldiers moved to flank the enemy force attacking Tucker. Maya and 1 soldier headed for the main building. "Connor, I'm coming to you," Maya said into her radio. "Hold position." She reached the building and entered through a side door, her rifle raised. The building's interior was a maze of rooms and hallways, perfect for close-quarters combat. Maya heard voices ahead, enemy soldiers clearing rooms. She signaled her partner to move left while she went right, flanking the enemy. She found Connor's team pinned down in a second-floor room, 3 enemy soldiers in the hallway preventing their escape. The 2 hostage role players sat against the wall, hands zip-tied, watching the exercise unfold. Maya came up behind the enemy soldiers silently. In a real situation, she'd have every advantage. In this exercise, she had to announce herself. "Contact rear," she shouted, raising her rifle. The enemy soldiers spun around, but Maya was faster. She'd trained for this specific scenario hundreds of times. Her rifle cracked 3 times, blank rounds, and red smoke markers deployed from the enemy soldiers' training vests. "Casualties," the exercise referee announced, appearing from a side room. 3 enemy KIA. Connor and his team emerged from the room, the hostages with them. "Nice timing, Sergeant," Connor said with a grin. "Let's move. Tucker's team is getting hammered out there." They raced through the building and out a back exit. Maya's radio crackled. "Sergeant Chen, this is Tucker." His voice was strained. "We're all marked as casualties. The entire distraction force is eliminated." "Understood, Tucker. You gave us the time we needed. Well done." Maya led her combined force, Connor's infiltration team, the 2 hostages, and her support element, toward the compound's south wall. This was the extraction route they'd planned, the path that should be clear. But as they approached the wall, enemy soldiers appeared from both sides. They'd finally realized what was happening and had repositioned to cut off the escape route. Maya's team was outnumbered 8-5, and they were carrying 2 role-playing hostages who couldn't fight. The exercise referee stepped forward, ready to call the engagement. But Maya wasn't done, not yet. "Smoke grenades," she ordered. Her soldiers deployed the training smoke grenades, filling the area with thick colored clouds. In the confusion, Maya directed her team over the wall using a human ladder technique, soldiers boosting each other up and over. The enemy soldiers fired blind into the smoke, but Maya's team was already moving. They cleared the wall with 30 seconds to spare before the exercise clock ran out. On the other side, they sprinted for the designated extraction point, a clearing 200 meters from the compound, where a helicopter would theoretically pick them up. They reached it just as the exercise horn sounded, marking the end of the operation. Maya's team had completed the objective. They'd rescued both hostages, extracted them from the compound, and made it to the pickup point. Despite being outnumbered, despite losing half their team, despite every obstacle Holland had thrown at them. The recruits collapsed on the ground, exhausted but exhilarated. Connor was grinning. Even the role-playing hostages looked impressed. But Maya knew this wasn't over. The real test would come during the after-action review, when Holland would try to discredit everything they'd accomplished. 2 hours later, all 3 teams assembled in the briefing room back at base. The recruits were still in their field uniforms, dirty and tired. The instructors sat at the front of the room, with Colonel Morrison observing from the back. Holland stood at the podium, reviewing the results. Team 1, led by Sergeant Wagner, completed their objective with minimal casualties. Excellent tactical movement and fire discipline. Wagner nodded, looking smug. Team 2, which I led, also completed the objective. We had some challenges, but overall a solid performance. Then Holland turned to the results from Maya's team. His expression was unreadable. Team 3, led by Sergeant Chen, did complete their objective. He paused, letting the words hang in the air. However, the casualty rate was unacceptable. 12 soldiers marked as killed or wounded. That's 75% casualties. In a real combat situation, that would be considered a catastrophic failure. Murmurs went through the room. Some recruits looked at Maya with doubt. Had she really failed despite completing the mission? Holland continued. Additionally, Sergeant Chen deviated significantly from standard tactics. She split her force multiple times, left soldiers in exposed positions, and took unnecessary risks. While the objective was technically achieved, the cost was too high. Maya sat quietly, her face neutral. She'd expected this. "Sergeant Chen," Holland said, turning to her, "do you have anything to say in your defense?" Maya stood up. "Permission to address the group, Staff Sergeant." Holland gestured for her to proceed, clearly expecting her to make excuses. Maya walked to the front of the room and faced the assembled recruits. "Staff Sergeant Holland is right," she began. "My team took heavy casualties, 12 soldiers out of 16. In a real combat situation, that would be devastating." She paused, scanning the faces before her. "But here's what he's not telling you. My team was given the most difficult objective, a defended compound with intel that understated the enemy force by more than 50%. We were set up to fail." Holland's face reddened. "Sergeant, that's—" "I'm not finished, Staff Sergeant." Maya's voice was firm but respectful. "The purpose of training exercises isn't just to complete objectives. It's to learn, and here's what my team learned today." She turned to Tucker, who sat in the front row, his uniform covered in red smoke residue marking him as a casualty. Private Tucker learned that sometimes the mission requires sacrifice. His entire element was wiped out, but their actions made the rescue possible. They held their position knowing they wouldn't survive, and they did it anyway. She looked at Connor. Private Mills learned that successful infiltration requires patience and timing. His team navigated a 50-meter drainage culvert in complete darkness and emerged exactly where they needed to be. Maya addressed the entire team. "All of you learned that when the plan falls apart, and plans always fall apart, you have to adapt, you have to think, you have to trust each other." She turned back to Holland. "Yes, we took heavy casualties, but we completed an impossible mission against overwhelming odds, and every single soldier on my team is now better prepared for real combat because they learned what it means to fight when everything is against you." The room was silent. Colonel Morrison stood up from the back of the room. "If I may interject, Staff Sergeant Holland." "Of course, sir," Holland replied, his jaw tight. Morrison walked to the front. "I've been observing all 3 teams today, and I've been watching the video feeds from the exercise referees. What I saw from Team 3 was remarkable." He pulled up footage on the projector screen. Images of Tucker's team holding their position against impossible odds, Connor's team moving through the culvert, Maya coordinating the extraction under fire. "This," Morrison said, pointing to the screen, "is what combat looks like. It's messy, it's costly, it doesn't follow the textbook, but this team completed their mission through initiative, adaptability, and courage." He turned to Holland. "Staff Sergeant, you gave Sergeant Chen an impossible task hoping she would fail. Instead, she turned it into the best training these recruits could have received. They learned more in 3 hours than they would have in a month of standard exercises." Holland's face was stone. "Sir, the casualty rate." "The casualty rate reflects the difficulty of the mission, not the quality of the leadership," Morrison cut him off. "And I think Private Tucker has something he'd like to say." Tucker stood up, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Sir, Sergeant Chen asked our team what we thought the casualty rate would be before we started. I said probably 90% or higher, given the odds. She said her goal was to keep it under 75%. He looked at Maya. "She beat her own projections, sir. And more than that, she made sure everyone understood why we were taking the risks we took. Every soldier knew their role. Nobody was abandoned or forgotten. That's leadership." Several other recruits nodded in agreement. Morrison smiled. "Thank you, Private. Staff Sergeant Holland, I think we can agree that all 3 teams performed admirably today, each facing different challenges. But I want to be clear about something." His tone became serious. The purpose of having Sergeant Chen in this unit is not to check a box or meet a quota. It's because she brings combat experience and leadership skills that make this training program better. And any instructor who can't see that needs to reconsider whether they're fit to train the next generation of soldiers. The message was clear. Holland had been put on notice. Morrison addressed the recruits one final time. "You're all dismissed. Get cleaned up, get some rest. Tomorrow we'll do individual debriefs on today's performance." As the room emptied, Holland approached Maya. For a moment, she thought he might finally say something respectful, or at least acknowledge that she'd proven herself. Instead, he leaned close and whispered, "This isn't over." Then he walked away, leaving Maya standing alone in the briefing room. But she wasn't alone for long. Connor, Tucker, and several other recruits from her team waited outside. "Sergeant," Connor said, "we just wanted to say, that was the best training we've ever had. Thank you." Tucker extended his hand. "I owe you an apology, Sergeant, for everything. You're the real deal." Maya shook his hand. "You did good work out there today, Private. All of you did." As she walked back to her quarters that evening, Maya allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. She'd won this battle, but Holland's parting words echoed in her mind. This wasn't over. The next morning, Maya arrived at the training office to find her desk cleared. Her files, her training materials, even her nameplate, all gone. Sergeant Wagner sat at the desk opposite hers, smiling coldly. "Didn't you hear? You've been reassigned. Report to the quartermaster's office. Apparently they need help with inventory." Inventory duty was the Army's way of sidelining someone. It was mind-numbing work, counting supplies in warehouses, far from any meaningful training role. Maya kept her expression neutral. "On whose authority?" "Staff Sergeant Holland's, effective immediately." So this was how it was going to be. Holland couldn't attack her performance directly anymore, so he'd simply remove her from any position where she could prove herself. Maya went straight to Colonel Morrison's office, but his aide told her the colonel was in meetings all day and couldn't be disturbed. She tried to file a formal complaint, but the process would take weeks. Holland had outmaneuvered her. By the time the complaint was processed, the current training cycle would be over. The recruits she'd worked with would move on. She'd be stuck counting boxes in a warehouse. For the first time since arriving at Fort Benning, Maya felt defeated. She spent that day in the quartermaster's warehouse, logging serial numbers on equipment crates. It was exactly as mind-numbing as she'd expected. The quartermaster, a friendly master sergeant named Rodriguez, seemed apologetic about the whole thing. "I don't know what's going on with you and Holland," Rodriguez said, "but for what it's worth, everyone knows you got a raw deal." "Everyone knows, but nobody can do anything about it," Maya replied, not bothering to hide her bitterness. "Welcome to the Army," Rodriguez said with a sympathetic shrug. That evening, Maya sat in her quarters, staring at her phone. She could request a transfer, move to a different unit, a different base, start over somewhere else where people hadn't already decided she didn't belong. She was seriously considering it when someone knocked on her door. It was Connor Mills, still in his training uniform. "Private, what are you doing here? This is officer quarters." "I know, Sergeant, but I had to talk to you. Can I come in?" Maya hesitated, then stepped aside. Connor entered looking nervous. "Sergeant, the whole team knows what happened. Holland reassigning you to inventory duty. It's wrong." "It's the Army, Private. Sometimes things aren't fair." "But we can't let him get away with this." Connor's voice rose with frustration. "You're the best instructor we have. You actually care about training us right, not just making us follow orders blindly." Maya appreciated his loyalty, but she was too tired to fight. "I appreciate that, Connor, but there's nothing you can do. Holland has the authority to make assignments. Unless someone higher up the chain intervenes, I'm stuck." Connor looked down at his hands. What if there was proof? proof that Holland has been sabotaging you from the start. Maya's attention sharpened. What kind of proof? Tucker and I have been documenting things. The way Holland gives you impossible assignments, how he talks about you when you're not around, the stuff Wagner says. Connor pulled out his phone. We've got recordings, Sergeant. Lots of them. Maya's first instinct was to tell him to delete everything, that recording superior officers could get him court-martialed. But then she thought about all the recruits who would come after her, all the soldiers who deserved better than instructors like Holland. Let me hear them, she said. For the next hour, Connor played recording after recording. Holland discussing how he planned to break Maya. Wagner making crude comments about her appearance and suggesting she'd only gotten her position through political pressure. Other instructors laughing along, creating a hostile environment that went far beyond professional disagreement. The recordings were damning. They proved a systematic effort to drive Maya out of her position, motivated not by concerns about competence but by simple prejudice. How did you get all this? Maya asked. Connor looked embarrassed. Tucker actually started it. After the obstacle course thing, he felt bad about how he'd treated you. He wanted to prove you were incompetent, so he started recording everything, thinking he'd catch you making mistakes. But instead, he caught all this. And now he's giving it to me. He's outside, actually, wanted to explain himself. Maya stepped outside her quarters and found Tucker waiting, looking more uncomfortable than she'd ever seen him. Sergeant Chen, he began, I was wrong about you. From day one I was wrong, and I helped create an environment where Holland and Wagner felt like they could treat you the way they did. I'm sorry. Maya studied him for a long moment. Why the change of heart, Tucker? Because you're a better soldier than most of the instructors here, and everyone knows it except the people who refuse to see it. And because my little sister wants to join the army. After yesterday, I keep thinking about what it would be like for her if she had to face what you faced. I'd want someone to stand up for her. Maya felt something shift inside her. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about every woman who would come after her, every soldier who deserved to be judged on merit rather than prejudice. All right, she said, here's what we're going to do. The next morning, Maya requested a formal meeting with Colonel Morrison. His aide tried to put her off, but Maya invoked her right to address her commanding officer on matters of harassment and discrimination, a request that couldn't be denied. Morrison met with her at 1400 hours. His expression was cautious, probably expecting more complaints about Holland. Maya came prepared. She brought copies of the recordings, transcribed and documented. She brought a timeline of Holland's actions, each one seemingly justifiable on its own but forming a clear pattern when viewed together. She brought testimony from recruits willing to go on record. Morrison listened to it all in silence, his face growing increasingly grave. When she finished, he sat back in his chair. Sergeant Chen, do you understand what you're alleging here? This is serious. If I move forward with an investigation, it's going to create significant disruption in this unit. I understand, sir, but if we don't address it, nothing changes. The next woman who gets assigned here will face the same thing, and the one after that. Morrison nodded slowly. You're right, and frankly, I should have seen this coming. I knew Holland had reservations, but I thought he was professional enough to put them aside. He paused. Leave this with me. I'll need a few days to review everything and consult with the Judge Advocate General's office. Yes, sir. And Sergeant, you're reassigned back to your training position effective immediately. Holland doesn't get to sideline you while this is being investigated. Maya felt a weight lift from her shoulders. Thank you, sir. The next 3 days were tense. Holland clearly knew something was happening, but he didn't know what. He kept his distance from Maya, conducting his duties with cold professionalism. Wagner was less careful. He confronted Maya in the training office, his face red with anger. You went crying to the colonel, didn't you? Couldn't handle a little tough treatment, so you had to run to Daddy." Maya didn't respond. She simply logged into her computer and continued her work. "You're going to regret this," Wagner hissed. "You think you've won something, but all you've done is prove you can't handle being in a combat unit. You're weak." "Sergeant Wagner," Maya said calmly, not looking up from her screen, "I'd recommend you save any further comments for the investigation." Wagner's face went pale. "Investigation? Didn't Staff Sergeant Holland tell you? There's a formal inquiry into allegations of harassment and creation of a hostile work environment. I'm sure you'll be called to testify." Wagner left the office without another word. On the fourth day, Morrison called a meeting of all training staff. Holland, Wagner, and 4 other instructors assembled in the conference room, along with Maya and a representative from the Judge Advocate General's office, a sharp-eyed captain named Reeves. Morrison didn't waste time. "Gentlemen, we have a problem. An investigation has revealed a pattern of harassment and discriminatory conduct towards Sergeant Chen. The evidence is substantial and credible." He outlined the findings without revealing his sources. Holland sat stone-faced. Wagner looked like he might be sick. "Staff Sergeant Holland, Sergeant First Class Wagner, you're both being reassigned pending the outcome of the formal investigation. Your conduct has brought discredit upon this unit and violated the Army's standards of professional behavior." "Sir," Holland spoke up, his voice tight, "I never violated any regulation. Everything I did was within my authority as—" "Your authority as a senior instructor does not include creating a hostile work environment, making derogatory comments about a fellow soldier's gender, or systematically undermining someone based on prejudice rather than performance." Morrison cut him off. "You're dismissed from this meeting. Report to the battalion commander's office at 0900 tomorrow." Holland and Wagner left, both looking stunned. Morrison turned to the remaining instructors. "Let me be clear. This unit will operate with respect and professionalism. Anyone who has a problem with that can request a transfer. Anyone who continues the behavior that led us to this point will face disciplinary action. Is that understood?" A chorus of "Yes, sir," answered him. After the meeting, Captain Reeves approached Maya. "Sergeant Chen, I want you to know that what you did took courage. A lot of soldiers in your position would have just requested a transfer and let the problem continue." "I thought about it," Maya admitted. "But then I realized I'd be letting down every soldier who comes after me." "Well, your testimony and evidence are going to make a significant difference. This kind of systemic behavior needs to be rooted out." The formal investigation took 3 weeks. During that time, Maya continued her duties training recruits. Without Holland's interference, she was able to work directly with soldiers who genuinely wanted to learn. Tucker became one of her most dedicated students, working hard to make up for his earlier attitude. Connor continued to excel. Even the recruits who had initially been skeptical came around when they saw how much they were learning. The investigation concluded with Holland being reassigned to a non-instructional position at a different base, effectively ending his career as a trainer. Wagner received a formal letter of reprimand and was reassigned to administrative duties. It wasn't a perfect outcome. Both men kept their ranks, kept their pensions, but they were removed from positions where they could hurt anyone else's career. 6 months later, Maya stood in front of a new class of recruits beginning their training cycle. Among them were 3 women, the first female recruits Alpha Company had accepted for their specialized program. Colonel Morrison had asked Maya to lead the entire training program, taking over Holland's old position. She'd accepted. "My name is Sergeant First Class Maya Chen," she told the assembled recruits. "I'm going to be your primary instructor for the next 12 weeks. Some of you are looking at me and wondering if a woman can really train you for combat operations. That's fine. I'm not here to convince you with words. I'm here to make you better soldiers." She paused, scanning the faces before her, some skeptical, some curious, some eager to learn. This program is hard. Many of you won't make it through. But if you're willing to put in the work, if you're willing to push past your limits, I'll teach you everything I know. And I know a lot. A few recruits smiled at that. Now let's get started. Everyone to the obstacle course. I'll be running it with you, full combat load. I want to see what you've got. As the recruits scrambled to grab their gear, Private Connor Mills, now promoted to specialist, approached her. He'd been assigned as her assistant instructor. "Think any of them will beat your record, Sergeant?" he asked with a grin. Maya smiled. "I hope so. That's the whole point, training soldiers who are better than we are." She led the recruits to the obstacle course, the same one where she'd proved herself 6 months ago. But this time, she wasn't trying to prove anything. She was just doing her job, training soldiers, passing on her knowledge, making the army better for the next generation. As she stood at the starting line, watching the recruits prepare, Maya thought about how far she'd come. The battles she'd fought, the obstacles she'd overcome, the changes she'd helped create. It hadn't been easy, it hadn't been fair, but it had been worth it. "All right," she called out. "First group, line up. Let's see what you've got." One of the female recruits stepped to the front of the line, meeting Maya's eyes with determination. Maya recognized that look. She'd seen it in her own mirror many times. "Ready?" Maya asked. "Yes, Sergeant," the recruit replied. "Then let's go." As the recruit took off running, attacking the course with everything she had, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope that the army was changing, slowly but surely. Hope that the soldiers she trained would face fewer barriers than she had. Hope that one day, no one would have to prove themselves twice just because of their gender. She'd taken them all down, not with revenge, not with anger, but with competence, courage, and an unwillingness to quit. And in doing so, she'd opened doors for everyone who came after her. That evening, as Maya walked across the base toward her quarters, she passed the training office where Holland had once ruled with casual cruelty. The nameplate beside the door now read, "SFC Maya Chen, Chief Instructor, Alpha Company."